Okay, so now we are going to practice turning our forms into objects. And we are going to start with a very basic one with the cube. So we already have a little demonstration video on how to make the cube. Now we are going to transform our cube into an ordinary object, something that you can see in real life. In this case, what I want to turn my cube into is a vintage television set. So the first thing I'm going to be working on is on adding some detail to the screen. So I'm going to have my screen right here. And from what I remember growing up, seeing vintage or old television set in my grandma's house, the screen usually was very small. The TVs were very bulky back then, but the screens were pretty small themselves. And they were always kind of rounded on the edges like this. So it was not a perfect square. It was more rounded on the corners. So I'm gonna go ahead and start doing what I remember. I'm working from memory. I don't really have anything to go for as reference, but this is more or less what I remember them to look like. And then they had some knobs that you had to turn around to change the channel. Usually they were a little bit bigger, but I didn't leave enough space, so I'm just gonna make it small right here, and then I'm gonna put some other buttons right there. Okay, so that is going to be the screen. Now a lot of them, they had their own little legs. They sat on the floor. So I'm gonna go ahead and use two, like a little cylinder, one here and one there, to make the legs. Again, I'm working by memory, what I remember seeing growing up in my grandma's house. This is what I remember a TV set, a vintage TV set looked like. Again, when you are making your own objects, you are welcome to draw anything that you like. The purpose of this assignment is not necessarily to be 100% accurate, but for us to practice transforming forms into objects. I'm gonna do another little leg right here. All right. Okay, so next, what I remember also is the bunny ears, the antennas. So I remember there being like a little dome on the top, something like this. Okay, so then I'm gonna go ahead and close it. And then I'm going to draw two lines facing the opposite direction. And those are going to be my antennas. Growing up, you always will send the youngest person, or I remember, at least in my grandma's house, we would always send my youngest brother or sister to switch the channels whenever the remote would get lost. I don't know if that's ever happened to you or you experienced anything like that. And then on the side, usually there was like something like for the sound, like a speaker or something. I remember there being some sort of lines like this. Something like that. Again, I'm just working from memory. I don't really have a reference, so it's okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it there. Now I'm gonna draw a little bit of a background. I always like to do the horizon line. The horizon line is just a line that separates the ground from the sky or the floor from the wall. Okay, right there. So that's, I'll do something on the floor just to have more detail. All right, and now I'm gonna add a little bit of cross hatching. We did that in the previous lesson, just to add a little bit of a shadow here underneath the TV. Maybe some on the legs too. All right. You don't have to add too many shading because the purpose of this is too much shading, because the purpose of this assignment is not necessarily for us to practice that, but it is for us to practice turning forms into objects. All right, so there's my sample. I started with a cube and I turned it into a vintage television set.